Good morning. I feel like I don't deserve that introduction, but I've just been doing what breaking microphones, right? Okay. Just been doing what's been, my passion for the last, it's actually about 23 years now, so I don't like to admit that though, because I age myself, so let me see if I can get this to work. All right. Last year, as Rachel said, I gave this presentation to a bunch of lawyers, and so I had to put a disclaimer in here, and I'm going to keep it in here this year because it's still relevant and it's still true. So I'm an employee of the state of Michigan. I'm here to discuss basically policies and procedures related to the My Choice program, and actually I've been asked to focus in on the spousal impoverishment piece of becoming eligible for My Choice. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't even play one on TV. So I will not answer legal questions, and I will not give you legal advice, but I will gladly answer any other types of questions. And I can't get into like specific situations, like if you have a specific client that you're having a problem with, this is not the forum in which to discuss that, but my contact information is in the back of the presentation, so you can call me. Okay. All right, so how many of you are familiar with the My Choice program? Okay, so about half. Okay, so the My Choice program is a home and community-based services program that is intended to be an alternative to nursing facility placement. So the legal, authority for My Choice comes from 1915B and C of the Social Security Act. So we 5 years ago, we added the B part, which is managed care. So My Choice is a managed care program. The managed part is only My Choice services, not all of Medicaid. We serve anyone, any adult with a disability or seniors, which of course, are adults, but seniors and other adults with disabilities over the age of 18. And I've already told you it provides nursing facility services, or alternatives to nursing facility. And so today we're just going to really focus in on My Choice eligibility, as I stated. I also want to mention too, if you have questions, because I'm only got a little over an hour to delve into this topic, and I could be here all day talking about it. So. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand, and I think someone could come around and, with a mic and get to you so that you can ask questions as we go along, because otherwise it will get lost in the context of the question. So feel free to interrupt me, that's fine. I would rather have a conversation than give a presentation anytime, so. So to be eligible for My Choice, you first have to meet the nursing facility level of care. Which basically means that you have some long-term, you have some deficits in your ability to care for yourself that are expected to be long-term, put it that way. You have to be eligible for Medicaid, and you must need and agree to accept at least one My Choice service in addition to the supports coordination that everyone gets. Also, you have to not be eligible for other state plan services, such as the home help program, that could meet your needs. So it's got to be beyond, you have to have needs beyond what home help or another program could assist you with. Now, the thing that I really like about My Choice is that it allows for expanded Medicaid eligibility. And this is also known as the 217 group because it's section 217 of some federal law. If you want to know the details, I could look at them. But so it allows for your spouse for the person who's needing services to be impoverished, and their spouse can retain marital assets up to a certain amount. It allows for the individual's income to be 300% of the Social Security amount, which this year's $2,250 per month income gross. And your spouse's income is not counted. And if you are eligible for My Choice, you do not have a spend down. And like I said, if you have questions, just let me know. You can tell I'm getting ahead of myself here, I'm sorry. Home help, that's the state plan personal care services. So a lot of times it's called chore services. It allows anyone who's eligible for Medicaid and has a need for personal care services. So it's ran through the local offices. Used to be DHS, now it's MDHHS local offices, so your county offices. And usually it's family members or friends who are providing the services. And there's a question way over there.
Where do you find the facility level of care, that list of the criteria for this?
So if you go to michigan.gov/MDHHS and do a search for nursing facility level of care, or NFLOC, you will be able to find the criteria there. A lot of people call this the doors. So there's 7 doors through which you can meet eligibility. And again, I could go through that too, but that would be another presentation. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
I know there's always a waiting list with My Choice. Is there a way to get around the waiting list, priority, that we move up in the list, for oxygen?
So, yeah, and the question was, and I will repeat it for those who couldn't hear, there's a waiting list for My Choice, and that is true. Most areas have a waiting list. It's not all areas of the state have a waiting list anymore. And the waiting list is not as long as it once was. There are criteria for getting on the waiting list and for prioritizing you once you are, within that waiting list. So they have what's called the My Choice Intake Guidelines that is usually done over the phone at the time of referral. And if you pass those guidelines, you can get on the waiting list. First priority, so ones who get enrolled before anyone else are, I always say kids, and that always stops me, because these are individuals who are turning 21 who have a need for private duty nursing. And private duty nursing is a state plan service up to the age of 21. So once you turn 21, the only way to get it is either through the My Choice waiver or the HAB supports waiver, which is on the behavioral health side. So that's priority 1. Priority 2 is any nursing facility resident. Priority 3 are those at imminent risk of being placed in a nursing facility, or someone with a adult protective services case who could be assisted by My Choice services. And then category 4 is everyone else. And all categories are in chronological order by the time that you apply or seek assistance. So there are ways to get out of category 4. The one that I don't like people to use is to go into a nursing facility. I'd rather, if you didn't want to be in a nursing facility, you don't go to get up. But you could be at imminent risk of nursing facility placement and call the waiver agency and have an imminent risk assessment done. And that could put you up higher on the waiting list. Any other questions? One more. Yeah.
So if someone is receiving home health services, but their level of care changes and they be moved over, some ways if they're eligible to receive the My Choice waiver?
So, yeah, somebody could be on home help and their needs they need more than just the personal care, and home help is limited in, how many hours and things that are approved. So, you could be eligible for My Choice waiver. You don't have priority for enrollment, though. So you would be at category 4 on the waiting list. So just because you're in home health doesn't mean you are higher on the My Choice waiting list or would get enrolled sooner than others. Anyone else? Okay. So with spousal impoverishment, basically it allows a healthy spouse to retain assets so that they don't have to be impoverished because their spouse needs long-term care. Before this law was passed, I think it was passed, I was going to say 92, but I actually think it was earlier than that. In order to be Medicaid eligible, the couple had to be down to like $3,000 in assets. So with spousal impoverishment, the healthy spouse can retain a lot more assets than that. I'm not up to date on the figure this year, but it's like over $150,000. So that's a big difference. Now, this spouse who needs the services, still down to $2,000. All right, so these are just the policies that, there's a lot of policies covering this topic, and there's no way I can get into all of them. But this is meant to point you, if you want to know more information, know more specifics, this is where you can go. So there's the Bridges Eligibility Manual, and those are available online. Section 106 talks about the My Choice program. 402 talks about the special Medicaid asset rules, so that is where you will find how many assets the spouse can protect. 405 talks about divestment. So, with most federal laws, there's a plus and a minus. So the positive side is that you can protect assets. The negative side is that if you give away your assets to become eligible, then you have a penalty of not being eligible for long-term care Medicaid. That's divestment. There are also BEM, my printout's really small, 546, that talks about post-eligibility patient pay amounts. That really applies to nursing facilities. It does not apply to the My Choice program, but that basically tells you how to figure out how much, if you're in a nursing facility, what your monthly patient pay amount to the nursing facility will be. There's the entire Medicaid provider manual. There's a chapter on nursing facilities, on My Choice, PACE, My Health Link, all of those programs. We also have the My Choice waiver application. We are renewing that right now, and the new My Choice waiver application will be out for public comment May 1st. So if you're interested, feel free to read the 350 or so pages of fun that is. I hear chuckles, yeah. It's not fun. And then there's also the My Choice contract with waiver agencies, which is available online, and I can tell you how to get there if you would like to know. I forget I have to do my thing. So in Bridges Eligibility Manual 405, it defines what is called a continuous period of care. So in order to say that, yes, I qualify for long-term care, the federal regulations say I need to have a continuous period of care, which means I need to have needed services for 30 days in a row. So that could either be that you're in a hospital for 30 days, in a nursing home. You could be approved for the waiver, which is the part of this that I'm going to be talking about. Or you could be approved for PACE, which is a program for all-inclusive care for the elderly. Also, you can be approved for My Health Link, since we're in Southeast Michigan and My Health Link is also in Southeast Michigan. I can talk about that. So approved for the waiver means that the waiver agency, there are 20 waiver agencies throughout the state. The waiver agency conducted an assessment. The person is eligible and receives or is expected to receive the sports coordination and other waiver services for at least 30 consecutive days. This means that you meet the nursing facility level of care, and you would otherwise, approved for the waiver, you do not actually have to be Medicaid eligible. You can be approved for the waiver and not be Medicaid eligible. And that is if you are married and have a community-based spouse. So otherwise, you have to be Medicaid eligible. So basically, there's a difference between approved for the waiver and enrolled in the waiver. And I have CMS Guidance that just came out on April 17th, where CMS admits that they messed this up a couple years ago. So, which I knew they did, and I was very happy to read this, because I said, yeah, I was right. I'm not the only one that was right, but it's, if you want to look for it online, it's the State Medicaid Director Letter number 18-004. And like I said, it just came out April 17th, but I'll get to that in a minute. So approved for the waiver means I meet the nursing facility level of care, I need services in the home, and I could become eligible for Medicaid. Enrolled in the waiver means all of that, plus I am Medicaid eligible, and there's a slot for me, and I'm actually started receiving my choice services. To get that 30 days of continuous care, and let's say you need to be, it's different in when you're doing it through home and community-based services than if you were doing it in a nursing facility. So in a nursing facility, obviously you've been admitted to the nursing facility for 30 days, boom, there's your 30 days of continuous care. It's very easy. With home and community-based services, either My Choice PACE or My Health Link, it's a little bit different because you have to, you basically say, yes, I've been approved. I could enroll if I were financially eligible. And normally you need to be paying privately for some services. You can't actually get waiver services, and that's what this state Medicaid director letter that I was just talking about said. You can't actually be getting waiver services because you have to be Medicaid eligible to get waiver services. You don't have to be Medicaid eligible to be admitted to a nursing facility. But there is some expectation that you're either having family members provide services to you or friends, or you're paying for your own home care services while you're waiting to obtain that Medicaid eligibility. To go into the CMS letter a little bit, they're talking about the Deficit Reduction Act of 2005, where it says the date which the individual is eligible for medical assistance under the state plan and would otherwise be receiving institutional level of care, but for the penalty. So they're talking about divestment here. In July of 2006, CMS said, okay, so this applies to the date on which the individual is eligible for Medicaid and is receiving institutional level of care services, but that created a catch-22 situation that they're, 12 years later figuring out, because the period you can't pay your divestment penalty until you're actually receiving waiver services. But you can't receive waiver services if you have a divestment penalty because waiver services mean they're Medicaid funded, right? So finally they said, where am I? So you have to be at the point in which the state has, so determine that the applicant meets the financial and non-financial requirements for Medicaid eligibility, the level of care criteria for the waiver, developed a person-centered service plan, and has a slot available for that person. That's when you start serving your divestment penalty. So thankfully, they finally figured that out. So back to 30 days of continuous care. Waiver agencies, if you need to establish that 30 days of continuous care, waiver agencies are required by contract to assist individuals in doing that. What they need to do is come out, do the assessment, determine that you would otherwise be eligible for My Choice, and work with setting up a person-centered plan of care and start receiving the services. They have to keep you open as approved for waiver for 30 days. So you've got to be getting that supports coordination at least for 30 days in order to have that 30-day period established. And the reason this 30 days is so essential is that if you don't have the 30 days, then you can't protect spousal assets. In My Choice, what happens is a nurse and a social worker will come out and do an assessment. They will look and make sure that the individual meets nursing facility level care. If they don't meet the nursing facility level care, they're given their appeal rights, so you can appeal that decision. You have to need a My Choice service, so if you don't need a My Choice service, again, you can appeal that decision. And if you meet all of those, then you are deemed approved for the waiver. They notify the local office, your DHS office. I still like to call it FIA, so it's not even DHS anymore. So if you have assets and the waiver agency is not able to presume that you're going to be Medicaid eligible, you don't have to be on the waiting list yet. You can, because there are people who like to protect a lot of assets, but from your 30 days of continuous care, you cut the marital assets in half, basically. And if you have $400,000 in marital assets, then you can protect $200,000. So why wouldn't you do that? Yeah, you've got to spend $198 before the individual is eligible for Medicaid, but why wouldn't you protect $200,000? I would, or at least try. So that's why you want to do this sooner rather than later. But you may not get on the waiting list until you have spent down your assets, and you're expected to get My Choice eligibility within 60 days. That's what policy says. Life is a little bit harder because if your waiting list, and in Southeast Michigan, the waiting list is a little bit longer. But if your waiting list is more than 60 days long, you want to make sure you're on that waiting list. If it's taking 180 days to get enrolled in My Choice, you want to be on that waiting list 180 days before your money runs out, right? So you can, when your money runs out, you've got Medicaid and you can start getting services. Yes.
Part of money that goes to the Medicaid individual that has to be spent down, does that money have to be spent on the individual?
No.
No.
So
if the spouse wanted to buy a new car,
mhm.
so he could go visit his wife, if she went into a nursing waiver, that would be okay.
Absolutely. So, and the question was about, in my example, the individual had to spend $198,000 before they were Medicaid eligible. There are things you can do with that money. It does not have to be spent on the actual individual, but it cannot be given away. So that's when you get into divestment if you give it away. So you can pay your house off. You can buy a new car, knowing that one car is exempt from, it's not a counted asset. You can buy funeral arrangements. You can make home improvements that you need to make. You can pay for care in the home or a nursing facility. So as long as you're spending the money, what you can't do is say, okay, I'm going to give all my grandkids $10,000 because they all need to go to college. Yeah, no, sorry, they frown on that. Right, so you can't, because that's considered giving away, because, it's hard to argue that your grandchild's college education benefits you. Any other question?
Yeah, just one more.
One more, okay. That's okay.
If I have a client that is in a memory care unit, and which she's eligible for Medicaid, or she is on Medicaid, could she be eligible for the Medicaid waiver, be taken out of the nursing home, go back in the home?
So the question was, she has a client in memory care unit, and can she be taken out of the memory care unit and be served through My Choice at home? Again, based on what you told me, so I'm assuming the person's Medicaid eligible. In most cases, I would say yes. The reason I say in most cases is because there is that income limit in My Choice that you need to be cognizant of. So it's $2,250 per month. If her income was $2,500 a month gross, she'd be eligible for Medicaid in the nursing facility, but not at home, or not through My Choice.
In the nursing home, she's getting 24-hour care. If she's eligible and she goes home and is on the Medicaid waiver is not going to give her 24-hour care.
So Medicaid waiver does not usually provide 24-hour services, 24/7. I say not usually because I guarantee there are people on My Choice who receive 24-hour, 7-day-a-week services. My Choice likes to bolster an informal support network, if you have that. So we will support your friends and family who are providing services to you rather than replace them. But we also allow My Choice in assisted living facilities, so whether they're licensed, AFC, homes for the aged. So in those circumstances, there should be 24-hour supervision there. So, but there's nothing, other than that income thing, there's nothing that would say, no, this person can't be served at home. Yes?
Is there an average for the amount of hours that someone is awarded for in-home?
So the question was, is there an average for the amount of hours that someone is awarded in-home? I could probably calculate an average. I don't know what that is because we don't think of it in those types of terms with My Choice. So My Choice requires the development of a person-centered plan of care. So it's based on what the person's needs are after doing an assessment, what their informal supports, friends and family are willing to provide, and then filling in the gap with My Choice services. So it depends a lot on the individual situation and their specific needs. So I wouldn't know what an average plan of care would be. It's all based on need. Any other questions? Okay. So go through here. I think we've talked about 30 days of continuous care a lot. And I wanted to mention too, I have on my notes here, this used to be a fairly straightforward process, and it will be again soon, but right now there's a little tickle in the system. Starting January 1st, we were trying to modernize continuous care with the CHAMP system, so which was going to make it so much easier to get the right level of care on. Actually, they were doing away with level of care. If you have worked in Medicaid, if you were in a nursing home prior, you used to get level of care 02. If you were in My Choice, you got level of care 22. They did away with the level of care codes, and we're allowing providers to do enrollments through the CHAMP system. Okay. There was a lot to think about. And one of the things that kept getting pushed off was how CHAMPs and bridges work together. Because your local office has things to do in order to make someone Medicaid eligible and to do what they call the initial asset assessment. But they also have to have something from a waiver agency that says, hey, this person's been approved for the waiver. So when they made these changes, they call it MCC, Modernizing Continuum of Care. They put in, one of the CMS Catch-22 things, so the state's guilty of that too. So you have to have a program enrollment type of my choice in CHAMPS. So the waiver agencies will go and put that in. The problem is that won't set until the person has a Medicaid ID number. Well, in order for the local office to process an initial asset assessment, they have to have that my choice, approved for my choice thing. So if they can't have the my choice program enrollment type, they don't get that on Bridges because it won't set because they don't have Medicaid, but they can't process a Medicaid application or even determine if the, and you don't have to have a Medicaid application to do an initial asset assessment. Anyway, there are workarounds for that. We're well aware of this issue. So if you have someone that you're working with who is in that situation, let your waiver agency know, and they can contact my staff, who will contact other staff, and we will get it figured out so at least you can start that initial asset assessment. But yeah, one of the guys who was in charge of this, I was on a phone conference with him. It was probably a good thing it was a phone conference. And he said, well, just have them apply for Medicaid. And I'm like, federal law says you don't have to apply for Medicaid. So why would you? And then they'll get a Medicaid ID number. I said, they don't need one. There's nothing that says they need one. Why would you do that? Anyway, there's a workaround. Supposedly, most of this will be fixed in June. They're doing updates to help fix this. We'll see. It's new. I had to chuckle a little bit because everyone was looking, being a referee and, couch referee or whatever. Trying to do a football analogy. It's not working. It's too early in the morning for me, but Sunday morning quarterback, there we go. And they're thinking, oh yeah, why can't the local office get these level of care codes on? It's such an easy thing to do. Well, then they try to take it away from the local offices and we're going to do it ourselves. And now they're figuring out why local offices often had a hard time doing it, because there's a lot of Medicaid eligibility stuff that you need to go through in order to change a level of care code. So anyway, my little sidebar. So if you have issues establishing that 30 days of continuous care, contact me, contact my staff. We'll work with the individuals. One thing that I have to advocate for the waiver agencies is, yes, they were required to do initial asset assessments, regardless of how many assets an individual has. However, they're not required to do that for free. So if the waiver agency is not able to presume that you're going to be Medicaid eligible, which usually means you have joint marital assets countable around $25,000, give or take a few thousand, then they don't have to presume that you're going to be eligible, and they can request that you pay for this service for them to come out and do the asset and do the supports coordination for 30 days and help you get through this process. So, but they have to tell you that up front. So you might get billed from that because if you're not Medicaid eligible, they're not getting any Medicaid payment for you. So just letting you know that. And this goes over the requirements for billing applicants. So that's also in the Medicaid provider manual, but basically you just have to tell them up front. Question over there. So what do you mean that they're not allowed to have a chore provider?
People with Medicaid can get chore provider services where they pay
Yes.
a family member, to take care of them.
Correct.
But you said that if they're eligible for this, they can't get the DHS chore provider services.
Correct.
So
Once they're enrolled in My Choice, you don't get the home help or chore services. That's because you would be getting all your personal care through the My Choice program.
who are those people?
It depends. It can be a home care agency. It's whoever's in the provider network for the waiver agency. It can be If you choose the self-determination option, that works a lot like home help. The big difference is that legal guardians and spouses cannot be your direct care service through the self-determination option. You can be hired in as an agency, and then the agency sends you to, you serve only that person.
Can be hired through that particular agency to
Yes.
get paid this time?
Yes,
Oh, okay, thanks.
they can. That is a possibility. So, with my choice, there's a self-determination option. If a person has a guardian or a legally responsible relative, which includes a spouse, they cannot directly provide the services to an individual through my choice, using the self-determination option where the participant is your employer. That's because guardians have the legal responsibility, and so basically they'd be supervising themselves and verifying that, yeah, I provided these services. Ask me, I'll tell you. So we need a additional layer of supervision in there. So they have to be hired by an agency, and then the agency is the employer. So otherwise, it's basically the guardians employing and supervising themselves, which doesn't work well for my choice. You can do that through an agency. It's their policy doesn't prohibit it, put it that way. So it's hard to prove a negative, right? So policy doesn't say this cannot happen, which usually, to my words, means it can happen. Now, we don't like to hire spouses because CMS doesn't like you to pay spouses to care for someone. However, there are situations where a spouse is the only caregiver that can do this. So usually that's it with someone with dementia who will not allow anyone else in the home, or it causes havoc on them. We don't want to do that. And the spouse can't leave, so the spouse can't be employed, so we might as well allow them. Another situation is in rural areas where we can't find anyone else to provide services. So there are exceptions, but yeah, the guardians, they can always be employed by an agency. To provide services, there's nothing that prohibits that. So, and if you have issues, like I said, my number's in here, call me, I'll walk through it. Now, I make it sound simple because I've got 21 minutes left. There's also background checks that need to be passed and all that other stuff. So if you're, have certain convictions, then yeah, you might not be able to be a provider, but that's federal law. In the back? Okay. The family member has an agency? Okay, is it okay to hire the family member through the agency? Right. So you're saying my son owns a home health care agency, my son wants to hire my daughter through that home care agency to care for, and there's no other agency willing to, right, but that's a little iffy based on just being nepotism and paternalistic, and it could be that the daughter why wouldn't the daughter get hired at a different agency that can, so yeah, that's kind of situation I would be leery of. But it's basically up to the waiver agency to determine if that's a viable option or not. And it could be that there are different protections in place to make sure that the work and the services are actually delivered. That would be my biggest concern. Okay. So basically, I was talking about billing participants. If you're going out to do that initial asset assessment, the big thing is you got to notify them in advance. These services that I'm providing you may not be covered by Medicaid, and so therefore you'll be liable for the payment. And now we get into divestment penalties, which I believe I've gotten ahead of myself again. So you have to be, so if you've given away money, if you've given all your grandkids, your $10,000 apiece, in order to serve a divestment penalty, you have to be approved for a long-term care program or admitted to a nursing facility. The penalty is that Medicaid won't pay for your services. So you can get out of divestment a number of ways. One is getting the money back from your grandson. But then you'd be over asset for Medicaid, so you'd have to pay for your own services anyway, right? The other is you go without long-term care services, but you still have to be approved for them. So you're still going to have some type of service in the home that you're paying for, because you wouldn't be admitted to a nursing facility and not expect to get a bill from the nursing facility, right? You're going to get a bill. So consider it the same thing with my choice, that you're going to have to either privately pay for some services in order to remain approved for the waiver, and to serve that divestment penalty down. So, and we have 17 minutes left for your questions.
At least in Indiana, the nursing home cases, if you gave away money in the last 7 years, there was a different percentage of...
It's 60 months.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's 5 years.
5 years.
All right, great.
And to my knowledge, it's always been 60 months. The policy is the same across all long-term care settings. So.
How long is the penalty? Is there a time frame on the penalty?
So the penalty is determined by dividing the amount that you divested by the average cost of nursing facility care in Michigan, and that's different. And again, it's not something I keep up with, but I think last time it was around $6,000 for, so, if you gave away $36,000, then you're going to have 3 months worth of penalties. It used to be, back when I was an eligibility specialist, that the penalty started as of the day that you gave away the money. So there used to be all these calculations that you could do, like, oh, it was $5,000 penalty. I'm going to give away $15,000, and then in 3 months I'll apply for Medicaid, and my penalty will be served. They changed that with either the Affordable Care Act or the Deficit Reduction Act. I can't remember which. But so they changed it. So your penalty starts on the day you apply for Medicaid. So regardless, you could have given it away 59 months ago, you should have waited another month. So it starts on the day you apply, and you don't pay it off until you are in a long-term care setting. So, and they go by days now too. That's the other thing. It used to be only a month long.
Yeah.
Can't do that anymore.
Quick
Yes.
question. This seems kind of like a hassle for people. Why don't they just get chore provider services through DHS?
Many do.
So what's the benefit of doing it this way with my choice?
The benefit, what we're talking about today, is that what we call the 217 group. So if you're eligible for Medicaid without needing long-term care, meeting the long-term care requirements, yeah, you can go ahead and get home help. The problem is that there's individuals who have a huge spend down. So if your income is $2,000 a month, you might be eligible for Medicaid, but you're going to have a $1,600 a month, give or take, spend down. And so you've got to spend $1,600 a month on services, on Medicaid, or incur that expense every month. I'm still confused about how spend downs work. So you're not, in reality, you're not going to get Medicaid. With My Choice, My Health Link, Payson, and the nursing homes, you can have that higher income and still be eligible for Medicaid. And the benefit with My Choice is you can have up to $2,250 a month, and you don't have a spend down if you're enrolled in the waiver. So you get to keep all that money. So shared checking accounts, those are always fun. Sometimes you can unshare them. It's usually, you'd want to call Bob to legally wrangle this, but if, let's say, the long-term care person is on their daughter's account and has always been there for the last 10 years, you have to prove that it's the daughter's money and that it's all the daughter, and she's been there forever. It's not always easy. It's not a 50-50 split. It's, okay, you have access to all that money, it's all yours. Yeah.
Are there acceptable amounts to give? For example, people donate to the church, or $25 to a child for their birthday, things like that.
Yes, you can still gift money, but when you gift, $25,000, it's different than if you're giving, if you give $25 to your church every week. I think it's determined on a case-by-case basis. That's really out of my realm, because that would be based on the local office who's looking at the application. But usually small amounts they're not worried about. It's when you can, for divestment, you have to be able to prove that you gave this money away knowing that, because you were trying to get eligible for Medicaid. So if you were perfectly healthy, the example I give, you're perfectly healthy and you have a habit of giving each of your grandkids $5,000 for Christmas every year, and then let's say you have a devastating stroke and now you need long-term care. Since you didn't need long-term care at Christmas when you gave them the money, then you can say, I didn't do this to be eligible for Medicaid. Here's when I started needing the long-term care on the day I had the stroke. So it's doable, but you have to do a lot of proving and fighting to get it done. Yeah.
Did you say there was an online listing of approved providers that were approved to accept the Medicaid waiver, like for assisted living?
Yeah,
and
there's
group homes?
20 waiver agencies through the state. Nope, I didn't give you a link to that here. If you go to michigan.gov/MDHHS, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, just search for My Choice. You will come up with a page that's, Michigan, it's got the counties on it, and if you scroll down you find your county and what region they're in, and it'll tell you who the waiver agencies are. And then each waiver agency has their own network of providers, so of home care agencies and, individuals that do chore services or respite or whatever. They have their own network.
Can you use more than one agency if one agency is full and they have a long waiting list? You go to another agency as long as they're in the same county?
So yeah, there's several areas in the state that have 2 waiver agencies serving them. And the waiting list is shared in that agency. So there are times when one agency is enrolling, the other is not, and you are free to choose which agency you want to use. So the question is the advantage of My Health Link in nursing homes?
Yeah, it just seems like the goal of the My Health Link program was to try to keep elderly populations in the home longer. So when we have an existing nursing home patient who is then being put into the passive enrollment, what's the benefit of doing that, I guess, if they're in a long-term setting?
So what's the benefit of staying in a passive enrollment if you're already in a nursing facility? Well, that's kind of out of my expertise. It's My Health Link, not my choice. Some of the benefit, they could transition you out. I say could, it's my understanding. I mean, I work right next to the integrated care division. They don't do a lot of nursing facility transitions there. So you are supposed to be able to coordinate your Medicare and Medicaid services, you know, kind of under one umbrella. If you've already been in the nursing facility for a long time and you're all Medicaid, I don't know. I can't think of one off the top of my head, so. Yes.
Something that I run into a lot is I have family members that are not able to help the person, and so they come to our facility for short-term rehab, and then they need to apply for the waiver program, but they can't afford to pay anyone to help them in the meantime while they're on the waiting list. So sometimes we've had to just put them into skilled nursing facilities to try for the NIFTY program. Is there any other way or ideas to help them in the meantime while they're struggling on the waiting list?
So if you're on the My Choice waiting list and you're in a nursing facility, it doesn't matter why you're in the nursing facility. You should still be at 2 on the waiting list. So
They're discharging and going home, and then what do they do when they get home?
They could always, if you haven't, this is where, planning can be very beneficial. So if you know it's someone who is in a short-term stay in a nursing facility who would likely need home and community-based services when they get out, you would want to contact the waiver agency right away, because the sooner they can plan to get out and do an assessment, then that person, when they're ready to go, they can be enrolled in My Choice. But you've also got a plan because they have staff who are already scheduled for assessments, and you've got to make sure that you can get in on their schedule. It can't always happen on the day of discharge. The other thing is they could ask for an imminent risk assessment to see if they're at risk of going back into the nursing facility. They could go to your long-term care side of the nursing facility rather than just the rehab, and they're still, second on the My Choice waiting list. But yeah, this is where planning is essential. And I know you can't always predict things, but there's no requirement that you have to be in the that you can't be in the rehab, section of the nursing facility in order to be priority 2 on the My Choice waiting list.
So I have had families call before when they're in short-term rehab and then denied to get on the waiting list because they're in a skilled nursing setting, even though it's short-term.
You need to contact me when that happens because that is wrong.
Okay.
That's very wrong. Unless they didn't meet the My Choice intake guidelines, but I don't know why they wouldn't.
So I have a client who was enrolled in the PACE program. So when PACE does their assessment for their program, are they actually enrolling someone in the waiver?
No. So PACE is a separate program. It's that is the first program that was integrating Medicare and Medicaid services. It has the same eligibility requirements as My Choice, but it's operated differently. And PACE, they do offer home and community-based services, but most of them, most PACE enrollees go to a center, like an adult daycare center, and they can get access to their acute care doctors and specialists and things at that center too. So it's it's a different type of long-term care program.
Thank you.
One up here, and then there's one in the back too.
So can a person double dip in PACE and the waiver?
No,
Okay.
you can only be in one long-term care program at a time.
Hi, I have a patient who has multiple sclerosis, so she's either wheelchair-bound or bed-bound, and right now DHS, she's in the Medicaid program with DHS, and she only gets about 5 hours a day for care. So the DHS worker suggested I put her on a waiting list for the My
For My
Waiver
Choice.
program, and hopefully the hopes is she'll get more hours of care. And I'm not sure
That's
how the funding
possible.
all works, so.
There's limits on home help, and home help only pays for like hands-on assistance. So they will they're supposed to calculate the minutes that you need someone to actually physically help you complete your ADLs. And then they have limits on shopping and homemaking and things. If you get the personal care, then you can have a certain amount, and it's the same amount for everyone. My Choice, we have a wider definition for personal care services that we call community living supports, and so it can be that prompting and cueing assistance. We can do homemaking. You don't have to need personal care or get personal care in order to get homemaking through community living supports with My Choice. So it's a different array of services with different eligibility requirements.
And often when I do call, Area Agency on Aging to do the waiting list, it's always, it can be up to a year sometimes
Yes.
for waiting. So I'm not sure how to, or when is someone more prioritized to get that type of, services in the home. And I had a question about what do you mean by someone who's at imminent risk? What criteria, would?
So,
Thank you.
So the best thing to do with the My Choice waiting list, and like I said, it is the longest here in Southeast Michigan, is to call as soon as possible, because then you're higher on the priority list as time goes by, right? You move up. If you don't call, then you're not going to get, everyone who calls before you gets higher than you, right? So call as soon as you indicate the need and get on the waiting list. As far as the imminent risk assessment, it looks at a number of things. So whether your health status has changed, whether you've lost a caregiver, if you have moved to a different living environment, if you need assistance with, like hands-on extensive assistance with activities of daily living. So there's a number of criteria that we look at, and based on the answers to that, we determine whether or not you meet the criteria. So, and I got one more question because I got 45 seconds. Go ahead.
Some of those people get home help.
Yep.
Can those people be eligible for waiver if they're on community mental health?
Yeah. So, and that's I got 25 seconds to come up with an answer. Community mental health has different eligibility criteria. So, on like the HAB supports waiver, they don't have this 300% of SSI income limit. They don't do this 217 group. So, and they also haven't combined personal care with their community living supports. So yes, you have to use home help in the community mental health system, and then they supplement that with their community living support service. You can get community mental health services with My Choice, but it's got to be a service that My Choice wouldn't otherwise cover. which are really those behavioral and mental health services, specific services. Like duplications are community living supports, respite. You know, My Choice has both of those services, so you wouldn't get any of those services through community living. But what we don't have is like supported employment or, the psychiatric services that are offered through community mental health. All right, and my time is up, so thank you all very much.